Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Impact Hard to Kill pay per view review for the 16th of January 2021. And I mean, not bad things on the show entirely, but also nothing that would make someone write home unless they were an Impact fan. There were good things to add to the program, but at the same time, it feels like a pay per view for the sake of a pay per view. I think there is a major drop off in the talent within Impact versus certainly an AEW or a New Japan, obviously. But I mean, it's difficult because how many talents do you have that you can sign that are pay per view worthy and ready and all of that? There were some good things on the show. There were some head scratching things on the show. One thing that I like that I don't think a lot of people will is Matt Stryker's return to commentary. I think Stryker is one of the better commentators, and certainly comparative to any of the other modern commentators, I would say he's the best commentator in the last 20 years that didn't have a presence before the year 2000. Um, and I know there's a lot of people that don't agree with that, but I really don't care. D'Lo Brown did surprisingly well as well. They start with the pre-show. John Burton, Madison Rain, and Scott Damore hosting the pre-show. Kenny Omega, Don Callis, and the Good Brothers analyzes Moose introduction to the main event. Callis basically said he'd put a contract over his head as memes to convince him to aid Omega, Anderson, and Gallows team tonight. Not really a fan of that. We get a promo from Sami Callihan. He promotes violence, and while everyone's talking about the main event, they'll be talking about the barbed wire match at the end of the night. And I mean, I don't. The barbed wire thing, we'll get to that later, but I'm not a fan. Pre-show match: Brian Myers defeats Josh Alexander. I think this is a waste of Alexander. I also think there are other people. There are other people that could have been bumped into the pre-show match, other than Myers and Alexander. Dissension with the North has been kind of going, and with Ethan Page probably leaving the promotion, they do need to find a new role for Alexander. Myers has been kind of running through, you know, different angles, and I like the wrestler's wrestler gimmick. Myers proposes to Alexander that they join up. Alexander is not a fan of the idea, and now they've kind of started a rivalry here. Alexander, who is now trying to show his merit as a single star or the approaching of a single star. And match sees Myers control the majority of the contest. Myers manages to throw Alexander off the ropes and to the floor, then gets a cutoff. Striking by Alexander is the comeback, and they trade some near falls. Nothing spectacular there. Myers pulls Alexander's tights. Myers wins by pulling down the headgear of his opponent and blinding him, and then hitting a lariat. Not bad. I mean, I think they're wasting Myers and the character. Him being 2-0 against Alexander when Alexander was once esteemed to be a major collegiate style wrestler seems kind of wasteful. It doesn't really make sense to me. Impact is piping in crowd noise for this. I'm not a fan. Ace Austin, Madman Fulton kind of joined the analysis table. Ace Austin recently won the Super X Cup, and Austin said he should be on tonight's card but isn't, which I agree with. There's many people that don't belong on this card if he's not on it. Anyway, Decay, Rosemary, and Crazy Steve defeat Tennille Dashwood and Caleb with a K. Decay reunites. I'm not a fan of the Crazy Steve gimmick, so I think Rosemary's wasted here. Crazy Steve comes out, encounters Caleb with Rosemary and Dashwood wrestle. Dashwood and Caleb have been kind of trying to interfere with Rosemary for a while. Talia is focused on the championship again, and it kind of leaves Rosemary without a major storyline. Caleb was bumping around kind of ironically, kind of goofily. He would cheat whenever given the opportunity, but it doesn't really give him a major advantage. Dashwood gets the upper hand on Rosemary. Dashwood and Caleb get overconfident and pay for it. Rosemary basically gets out of the what's up headbutt, and Rosemary counters, tags in Steve. Steve gets cut off for a little while. And then Dashwood and Caleb stop to take selfies, which is just goofy. I get it that it's gimmicks, but this is just stupid. Steve and Rosemary hit Dashwood and Caleb with missed, and then Steve hits a DDT from the second rope to win. Not a good match. Waste of Caleb Connolly, who, if you've ever seen him in the Independents, is much better than this character would indicate. Striker and D'Lo Brown run down tonight's card. Even in the first match, I like the pairing. Surprised that D'Lo is this competent as a talker. Never really saw him as that. So surprised and excited by that. Violent by Design, Eric Young, Joe Doring, and Diener defeat Dreamer, Rhino, and Cousin Jake in an old school rules match. I'm not a fan of these either. Older guys who are just doing the hardcore thing for the sake of it 20 years later. No, not necessary. Young and Doring have been basically bullies for weeks, and Cody Diener turns on his cousin and join the EY group, which is Violent by Design. I do like the name. Dreamer forms a trio, and with Jake and Rhino. Violent by Design are wearing matching gear, so I guess they're going to be a major stable. Diener versus Cousin Jake confrontation's a pretty big thing. Cousin Jake finally stands up for himself. Doring confronts all three of the baby faces, and they're swinging some chairs, doing some damage. Doring is able to kind of take all the baby faces out, which makes them look weak. The fact that Doring was once in All Japan and has fallen to the point of being with this promotion is also kind of sad. Basically the story of the match is no one can get him off his feet, and it took Rhino hitting a pretty solid gore to get that done. End of the match, everybody takes turns. Dreamer drops EY on some thumbtacks. Young drops Jake with a pile driver for the win. Joe Doring is much better than most of the people in Impact, and I hope they give him, at some point, some sort of championship run or major storyline outside of this, just because I think this is below what he's capable of doing. And then we get a segment, Swan and Sabin meeting with Moose. Swan told Moose that he doesn't trust him, said it should be Willie Mack instead of Moose in the match. Moose said he hates them both, but when it comes to Impact, he bleeds Impact, and he is not happy that people are coming from the outside to disrespect his promotion, his home. And, I mean, Moose being a babyface against the invasion from AEW actually does look good for the Impact brand. I'm not necessarily sure that it tells the story with Rich Swann that needed to be told, but maybe the Impact and AEW alignment takes precedence right now. Matter of fact, I would think that it would. Fire and Flava, Kara Hogan, and Tasha Steelz defeated Havoc and Nevaeh to win the Knockout Championship. We're finally at the finals of the tournament. Clash of Styles match, if there ever was one. Havoc and Nevaeh dominate early. Hogan and Steelz get some double teams. Havoc gets double teamed behind the referee's back, and they cut her off. Havoc being a babyface here, along with Nevaeh being a babyface here just doesn't make sense. Um, Hogan and Steels are in constant perpetual motion and making quick tags, which does make sense, and it works. Um, it works from the standpoint that Hogan and Steels. Hogan, who was really good in Shine years ago. Steels, I haven't seen as much of, although I did see a couple of her matches on NWA Power in 2019. I certainly think that there's something to this team. I don't necessarily think the brand needs women's tag team championships. It comes off as trying to be WWE light, but that's just a matter of preference. Hogan ends up pinning Nevaeh when Steels held off Havoc on the outside. Um, Havoc does hit a double power bomb to show power before the match ends. Um, I mean, Gail Kim and Madison Rayne, former tag champs, come out to crown the new champions. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Brian Hebner makes his return to the promotion in this particular match. Decay approaches Talia backing her for tonight's match. Taya asks them to stay behind. She says she wants to do this alone. Ace Austin and Fulton come down. They cut a promo. Said it's a waste of time only to have him talking in the pre-show. D'Amore adds him to the. It should add him to the X Division match tonight. This doesn't happen. And then D'Amore comes out and gives him another match instead. Matt Cardona or Cordova, Cardona, yeah. For some reason, I want to call him Cordova. I don't know. I mean, isn't he with AEW? And if he signed with Impact when he had a shot with AEW and he's supposedly friends with Cody, I think it's a step backwards. If this is part of a trade agreement with AEW just to give him work because he hasn't had it that much, that's an okay thing. Match is good for Austin. I think Austin is the best thing they have in Impact right now. And Cardona does get close to finishing Austin. Fulton interferes and gets a DQ. Cardona clears the ring with a babyface go home, which is cool. I don't necessarily know that, not having a finish was the right thing to do, but it is what it is. X Division Championship match. Manik defeating Chris Bay and Rohit Raju to retain the championship. TJP, Manik's Real Identity. They've basically been feuding for a couple of months now. The clash of styles and the motives in the match was sold really well by the commentators. Brawler versus Technician versus Flyer. Everybody's style is highlighted here. Raju and Bay don't pretend to be on the same side. They work together against TJP only when necessary, but they're not playing to be friends. The story of the match is basically the two heels trying to race to get their hands on Rennick. Lots of spots back and forth. Manik gets the Mamba Smash and gets caught with a springboard cutter mid-match. Match builds to Raju finally unmasking Manik, but face-painted TJP is what's there. The commentators no-sell it, which was just awesome. Everybody trades near falls near the end. And then they have kind of teases to Raju stealing the title again. It doesn't happen. Manik goes on to win with a snap pin after basically both guys have tried to outsmart him. Backstage, Alicia Edwards pleads with Eddie to let her out there with him. Eddie forbids her from coming out and needs to do this alone. He couldn't risk having her get hurt, knowing what Callahan and Shamrock are willing and able to do. This is just, I don't like this. I mean, in the sense of, you have her as a character on your television. She's his real life wife, which means she should have more of a stake. If she loves her husband, is going to, override him and go out there. So this promo is kind of pointless. Deanna Purrazzo with Kimberly and Susan defeats Taya Valkyrie with Decay to win to retain the championship. Match is a brawl during the very early stages. Rosemary and Kimberly basically get into it on the outside of the ring, so there's a little bit of extra gaga. Crazy Steve and Susan argue, so it kind of takes the heat off of the actual people in the match. I'm not necessarily a fan of that. Everything's under control. Purrazzo cuts Talia off and starts going on her left arm. Purrazzo is probably the best woman they have in the promotion right now, maybe the best woman they've had in several years. And Purrazzo starts targeting the leg too, so she's taking her apart, kind of like an old video game. Pick one body part, stick with it, and then weaken another part. Hooks in a half Boston crab. Taya is based on striking and suplexes, body slams. Tries to cut Purrazzo's offense off, doesn't do enough. Her knee buckles when she's trying to hit her finish. She tries submissions, moves like the curve stomp that wouldn't require putting the weight on the knee. I'm not a fan of Talia, but this is probably the best match I've ever seen her in. Purrazzo hits the Mastrada and then brings her opponent down with a Fujiwara armbar and locks in the Venus de Milo for the verbal submission. Match was a little short, but very good while it lasted. Again, if you're going to build a women's division, Deonna Purrazzo is the best thing they have for this. Taya cries after the match. Don't know where that's going. AC Romero and Johnny Bravo are joking about the whole shooting thing. Romero discovers that Larry D had been framed by the knockouts. Karate Man defeats Ethan Page. If there's ever any need for more proof that he's leaving the promotion, that's there and here. Page has a mental breakdown when they can't regain the tag team titles. Ethan Page does basic stuff like he's out of a video game from 25 years ago. It's comedy. Karate Man rips Page's heart out. It's stupid comedy. It's cinematic, and it was a waste of time. Don Callis comes out and meets with Moose. Callis puts Moose over and brings up the contract, saying they have a big future together, but it'd be terrible if something happens with Omega, and then they get sued and can't keep contractual obligations. Moose tells Callis no matter who he teams with, he plays to win, and once he's done with Omega, he'll win Swanton's title, and maybe he'll show up on AEW and take Omega's title too. Good babyface turn. Again, it doesn't make sense for there to be the baby heel dynamic with Swan to this point unless you're really going to fully turn, Moose, and maybe that's what they're doing. Who knows? Eddie Edwards defeated Sami Callihan in the Barbed Wire Massacre 4. They've been feuding for years. I'm not a fan of it. Like, it's too long at this point. Anyway, ring surrounded by barbed wire weapons. One side of the ring even has what looks like the wall of a cage wrapped in barbed wire. It's kind of indie-rific. I'm not necessarily a fan. Edwards is angry and passionate, and he takes needless risks. Callihan takes advantage of the risks that Edwards is taking all throughout the match. Edwards is playing within the confines of where Callihan thrives, and he wants to win. And then, I mean, there's blood really early. I'm not a fan of blood in wrestling anymore. This is 2021. Blood had its place, but with bloodborne diseases and the coronavirus and everything about people's health, I don't think this needed blood. That's just a personal preference thing. It's not a shot at either guy. Matter of fact, I've been on shows with Eddie Edwards. I respect him. don't necessarily like this as a way for him to go. Edwards wrapped barbed wire around Callahan's forehead, cuts him up pretty good. Edwards gets busted open a couple minutes later himself. Callahan catches him with a barbed wire board, and he crashes through it. Brawl continues. Callahan uses a old Nintendo 64 controller wrapped in barbed wire. I thought that was a cool touch. Edwards uses a chair, also barbed wire wrapped. Both men try to make wrapping their fists in barbed wire, bringing us back to the Rotten Brothers in ECW 1995. Edwards and Callahan basically they go as far as they can. Big near falls near the end of the match. Callahan hits a pile driver from the second rope onto a barbed wire board. Ouch. And then Edwards blocks a low blow, hits the Boston Knee Party and Emerald Flosion, and gets a win. It's definitely brutal and bloody. If you like deathmatch stuff, you'll like this. If you don't, it's probably worth skipping. Alicia comes out to help Eddie to the back, which makes sense. Rebellion pay-per-view takes place on April 24th. I don't know that they need another pay-per-view that soon, but I guess they're trying something. We go to the main event, which is Omega and the Good Brothers, Anderson and Gallows, with Don Callis defeating Rich Swann and Moose and Chris Sabin. Originally supposed to be Alex Shelley in the match, but Shelley announced he'd be unable to travel to Nashville, and he had to be replaced. Story basically goes back to Callis helping Omega win the AEW championship and their friendship. Moose looks probably the best he's ever looked here, and I mean it's a pretty big deal. Good Brothers and Omega come out with Bullet Club gear. I don't know that most of the American fans know enough about the Bullet Club for that to make an impact. I could be wrong, although, and no pun intended with the word impact there, although I think maybe the 100,000 people and maybe 20,000 of them, or maybe there's 200,000 Impact fans total, and maybe 20,000 of them, 10,000 of them saw this show. I think those hardcore fans would know what the Bullet Club is, and I think that may work there. Anyway, pointed to the logo on several occasions. Callis makes Omega a special introduction. Match has some unique storytelling. Sabin and Swann both do a lot of babyface selling. The Impact Tag Team are, they do a lot of comebacks, and there's triple team moves, there's dives, there's strikes, kicks, lots of stuff. Omega and the Good Brothers team, only Omega is going for pins, so Omega is put above the Good Brothers like he's the leader of the pack. Good Brothers are doing his grunt work, is the main story of the match. Everybody on the Impact-based team is getting near falls on Omega. Omega oversells. He's trying to be Ric Flair, only with flashy spots. But the difference is Flair, A, is actually over. B, has actual heel tendencies. People either cheer Kenny Omega because he's a video game guy, or they boo him because of Don Callis. Nobody cares about Kenny Omega in terms of caring about him as a character. They care about him from just kind of this goofy outside. And I'm not a fan of Omega being AEW champion either, to be completely honest. I think there are more talented people who deserve that opportunity. Anyway, end of the match comes down to Swann and Omega. Swann has several near falls on Omega, hits the 450. But in the end, Omega hits the One-Wing Angel on Swann for the win. Good match for what it was. I'm not necessarily sure that Omega winning on an Impact pay-per-view doesn't lead to kind of the need for some sort of vengeance come Wednesday, and if they don't do it, it looks really weak. Anyway, because Impact looks like the lesser brand, and they are a lesser brand, but do you really want their fans to feel that way? In any event, that is the close for today. We'll be back with more of the Mid-South review series. Got over 1,000 audios for you to check out. Hopefully something you like. Please subscribe, like, comment below, and all that good stuff. Till next time, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment.